On July 13, 1967, the Tour de France passed through a small French village at the foot of Mont Ventoux. By the time it left, one man was dead on the road. One career was finished before anyone admitted why, and a silence began. That would last 57 years. The village was called Carpentras. The mountain above it was called the Giant of Provence. And the man who died on its slopes that afternoon was not just any cyclist. He was Tom Simpson, the greatest British cyclist who had ever lived. What the official report said, heat exhaustion. What the autopsy found, something the Tour de France organizers spent the next decade trying to make the world forget. This is File 007. And this is what actually happened on that mountain. To understand what Mont Ventoux does to a human body, you need to understand what it looks like from a distance. From the valley floor near Carpentras, it rises nearly 2,000 meters above sea level. Its summit is completely bare. No trees, no grass, just white limestone rubble and a meteorological station that records winds of over 300 kilometers per hour in winter. Cyclists who have raced it describe the summit plateau as a place that feels architecturally hostile to human life. The gradient averages 9% for the final 12 kilometers. There is no shade. The road reflects heat upward from below, while the sun punishes from above. In the summer of 1967, the temperature on the exposed upper slopes reached 50 degrees Celsius. The Tour de France route committee knew all of this. They had sent riders up Ventoux before. They knew what the mountain could extract from an already depleted athlete on the 13th stage of the world's hardest race. They chose it anyway. Thomas Simpson was born in 1937 in a coal mining village in County Durham, England. He grew up understanding that the body was an instrument of labor, something you pushed until it gave out, then pushed further. He took that philosophy onto a bicycle, and it made him the most decorated British cyclist of his generation. By 1965, he was world champion. By 1967, he was the favorite to win the Tour de France outright. He had won Milan, San Remo, the Tour of Flanders, Bordeaux, Paris. The British press had already written the coronation piece. They were waiting for him to confirm it. But here is what the coronation pieces never mentioned. Here is what the team cars knew, and what the race doctor suspected, and what no official record was ever permitted to confirm. Tom Simpson was racing on amphetamines, had been for years, and by the morning of stage 13, his system was already carrying more than any body was designed to hold. Stage 13, July 13th, 1967. The peloton reached the base of Mont Ventoux at noon. The heat was already catastrophic. Riders were pouring water over their heads every kilometer. Some were already cramping. The road surface temperature had exceeded 60 degrees. At 6 kilometers from the summit, Simpson was in a small lead group. Eyewitnesses on the roadside, and there were thousands of them, lining the mountain as they always did, later described his riding as increasingly erratic. He was weaving, drifting. His head was dropping toward the handlebars. 1 kilometer from the summit, Tom Simpson fell off his bicycle. He did not crash. He simply stopped pedaling, lost balance, and fell sideways onto the road. Spectators ran to him. He looked up at them and said the words that witnesses would quote in newspaper reports for decades afterward. "Put me back on my bike." They put him back on his bicycle. He rode on. He was conscious. He was pedaling. And 500 meters later, he fell again. This time he did not get up. The race doctor reached him within minutes. Artificial respiration was attempted on the road. A helicopter was called. Tom Simpson was airlifted to a hospital in Avignon. He was pronounced dead at 5:32 in the afternoon. He was 29 years old. The official cause of death listed on the initial report: heart failure due to heat exhaustion combined with physical overexertion. What was not listed: the full toxicological findings of the autopsy conducted 2 days later in a Marseille laboratory. Those results were sealed, not published, not shared with the press. What we know now, through documents that entered the public domain decades later, is this. The autopsy found methamphetamine and cognac in Simpson's bloodstream at levels that, when combined with the extreme heat and physical depletion of stage 13, had placed a terminal load on his cardiac system. He had not died of the heat alone. He had been chemically prevented from feeling the warnings the heat was sending him. And there was one more detail. Found in the rear jersey pocket of Tom Simpson's racing kit, on the road beside his fallen body, were 2 empty tubes of amphetamine tablets. One of the tubes still had a tablet inside it. His hands, according to the first responders, had been clenched around it. The Tour de France organizers faced a decision that had no clean outcome. Tom Simpson was not merely dead. He was dead in a manner that exposed, with lethal clarity, what the race had known and tolerated for a generation. Every team car in the peloton carried substances that were technically illegal under French law. Every team doctor knew what riders were taking. The entire infrastructure of professional cycling in 1967 ran on an open secret. What followed was not accountability. It was management. The race continued the next day. Riders completed stage 14. The Tour de France finished in Paris 11 days later, as scheduled. The sport moved on with the speed of an organization that had decided, collectively, that no one would benefit from the truth. There was one exception. A British journalist named Noel Cuddle filed a piece that summer that came closer to the truth than anything else published in the immediate aftermath. His editors pulled the most damaging paragraphs before publication. The cut version ran. The full version did not surface until the journalist's private papers were donated to a university archive in 2014. The village of Carpentras has a memorial to Tom Simpson today. A stone marker on the road near the spot where he fell at 1 kilometre from the summit. Cyclists leave water bottles there, sometimes food, sometimes photographs. The shrine has been maintained continuously since 1967 by people who never met him but understand, in the way that cyclists understand things, exactly what the mountain cost him. But here is the detail that rarely appears alongside the memorial photographs. In 2024, a researcher working through newly declassified race documents from the French National Sports Archive found a team car logbook from the 1967 Tour. The logbook listed, in handwritten entries, the substances distributed to riders by team staff on each stage morning. The entry for stage 13 was not redacted. It was simply never redacted because whoever filed the document 43 years earlier apparently assumed it would never be read. What we know is in the logbook. What we don't know is how many other logbooks exist in how many other archives with how many other entries that were simply never redacted because no one thought anyone would ever look. That is the nature of a silence maintained not by destruction, but by indifference. It is harder to break, and it leaves more behind. Tom Simpson's death did produce one visible consequence. The Union Cyclist Internationale introduced mandatory doping controls at the Tour de France in 1968, the first systematic anti-doping program in the race's 64-year history. The controls were rudimentary. The substances they could detect were limited. Riders adapted within a single season. What the controls did not produce was honesty. The culture that had handed Tom Simpson 2 tubes of amphetamines before stage 13 of the Tour de France did not dissolve because of a urine sample protocol. It reorganized. It found new substances. It hired chemists who understood detection windows better than the testers did. It adapted as it always had. The stone on the mountain at 1 kilometre from the summit of Mont Ventoux marks where Tom Simpson fell the second time. It does not say what he was carrying. It does not explain why he was allowed to get back on a bike after the first fall. It says, in memory of Tom Simpson, Olympic medalist, world champion, British sporting ambassador. Every year, on the 13th of July, cyclists stop there. Some of them know the full story. Most of them know only the monument. And the mountain, which has no memory of its own, simply stands there under the summer sun and waits for the next one to try. The Tour de France did not kill Tom Simpson. The amphetamines did not kill Tom Simpson. The heat did not kill Tom Simpson. What killed Tom Simpson was a system that had decided, long before stage 13, that the answer to the question of what riders were putting in their bodies was a question it did not want answered. Until the next investigation, keep the files open. File closed. Next file. A record. A mountain. And the hour that breaks every man who tries. The bike files. Subscribe for the next case.